This conference will now be recorded.
Maybe if you know Pronovix already from before, you might have seen my strategy webinar. Generally, I like to think about big pictures and ecosystems and stuff like that. So I hope you'll like the 3 trends that I've selected today for you. And yeah, I'd love to also hear your feedback at the end of the webinar. Very short word about our company. In case you don't know, we're Pronovix. We're a developer portal consultancy specialist. So we're fully dedicated to developer portals. That's all we do. And as far as I know, I think, I'm not sure, it's always, I believe that we're the only consultancy that's fully dedicated to developer portals. There's other consultancies that do kind of like a mix of things, including dev portals, but full dedication and the combination of product and services. They're quite unique. So we support both new and existing dev portals. So if you have a dev portal, we probably can mean something for you either through our services or through some of our new capabilities that we're exposing with our CMS, dev portal CMS. If you don't have a dev portal yet, then obviously we can help you in creating your first developer portal. But that's it for the commercials. Let's dig into the strategic stuff, the juicy, interesting trends. So when I was thinking a bit about like what trends there are this year, or what are the new things that I'm seeing happening, I came up with these 3. First is the cross-pollination between the business and the developer personas, and kind of like the emergence of a technologist persona. That's a combination of those 2. Then the splitting of API portals into interface and platform developer portals. And then the last one is 2023. You can't talk about trends without AI, the hype wave of all hype waves. I want to do a little bit of a contrarian. Can you hear me? I hope you heard me okay, because my microphone was turned the wrong way around. I'll bring, I think, a little bit contrarian view on AI readiness and how APIs and up-to-date documentation, the things that I think most of you are doing for your day-to-day job, can help with getting your company to get ready for the adoption or adaptation to AI. Okay, so but first topic. Oh, before I get started, if you have any questions, just pop up your hand or drop it in the chat. I'll get back to it probably at the end. I'll see a little bit how things evolve, but I'll check it in once in a while, and then I can answer them either during the conversation or at the end, like in a more informal conversation. So first topic. Business and developer personas are cross-pollinating into technologist persona. What do I mean with this? This was something that came up on the DevPortal Awards. In case you don't know about the DevPortal Awards yet, this is a free community thing we do to learn about what's hot and what's changing in the DevPortal scene. We do it for a couple of years now. The next one, the nominations will close until on the 14th of July, so 14 juillet. If you're from France, then make sure it happens before you go on holiday. And for everybody else, 14th of July is the deadline. Make sure to submit your portal if you have one that you'd like to get feedback on from the DevPortal Awards jury. Now, during the DevPortal Awards, we've got there's different aspects to it. One is, of course, the awards itself, like the winners and so on. But I think the most interesting thing is the jury interviews, where they talk a little bit about kind of like the trends that they're seeing after evaluating the portals of that year. And I think it was last year that the jury mentioned that they started seeing this, that there's no longer a strict distinction between developers and business personas. And I think this is an interesting evolution, because not that long ago, Twilio, which was one of the darlings of the API community, had this kind of controversies. You know, it was a little bit of a, in Dutch we would say stoot. It was a bit of a controversial way of positioning, where they were saying like, you know, don't, or at least this is how I interpreted this, is like, you manager, your business person, don't worry your pretty little heads, just ask your developer. They probably know better what to do with this. And there was this idea of the developer as the kingmaker, as the person who is making decision what technologies they'll integrate into the software that they're building. And as a result, the developer as the person who is maybe not a decision maker, but still is making decisions. And it was really, really interesting, of course. But what we started seeing is that this started, well, it's not really shifting. It is still important to cater to developers to have good developer experience, but it's no longer this either this or that. I don't think that it, you know, you can just cater to developers and be fine, you know, great, an awesome developer experience, and it doesn't matter how expensive it is. That's not true. The other way around, you know, you can't have a great business without a good developer experience. If you have some technology assets that you're trying to expose to community. Now, interesting enough, as I was doing my research for this presentation, I found that Twilio has changed their billboard, at least, or this is not the same billboard, but when I started looking for Twilio billboards, I found a blog post where they were talking about this new billboard that they have up, which the way I'm reading it is this is very much a business case. Like, how can I reduce acquisition costs by 65%? Yeah, this is a business story. This is no longer a purely developer story or developer experience story, which is really, really interesting. And then I went looking at their DevPortal that traditionally or famously or infamously had this, you know, their DevPortal was all about, or their site was all about developers. And then there was a link for the business people where they could get their information, kind of like, you know, we really care about developers first, and then the business people, you know, they can also get some information, but, you know, don't worry your pretty little heads. That's kind of like how it felt. And they no longer have that. Their website now has 4 call to actions for 4 different personas. Developers still the first, but I think then they have marketeers and then 2 more. So yeah, this clearly is a trend that's happening. What's behind this? I think that in the first place, basic API literacy is spreading. This is not uniformly there yet. There will always be organizations where management doesn't really understand APIs yet, but a familiarity and some basic understanding of APIs is growing throughout organizations in the world. So business leaders that are making decisions that are connected to APIs and developer tools that are being used, they want to at least to have a bird's eye view. If they're not promoted from a developer position and they actually are developers, they want to at least excuse me. They want to at least have a bird's eye view of how things will work. I was asking this to people at API Docs in Amsterdam a couple of weeks ago or 2 weeks ago, and there are people who are saying like, yeah, it's true to some extent. Business leadership starts to understand APIs, but it still is very uneven. Some organizations, this is more advanced than others. A lot of more traditional organizations, there's still a lot of work. But yeah, that's one of the things. And then the other aspect, I think, that's a really big one, is that in a recession economy, nobody can afford to ignore the business needs. So developers simply can't afford to ignore costs and potential business impact of the choices that they're making. So developers also want to understand why they're making a certain business decision and if that's a good career move to choose this over the other. So yes, developers are key, but I believe that the focus of your developer portal needs to be both. It needs to be both business and developer focused. And you need to think about the business objectives that your APIs and your API program and your developer portal as a whole is supporting. A couple of examples just to demonstrate. So external portals, you might be trying to enable partners to build integrations or integrate self-service capabilities so that your customers can basically embed your services or your service request form into their infrastructure. Maybe you're trying to build an innovation ecosystem with APIs so you can keep an eye on what people are developing in your space, so you become a platform that can then piggyback on innovations that might not have started in your organization, but you can keep an eye on it. And on internally, software and capability reuse, all of these have a clear need for both business and developer personas to properly understand what they're about, and they have both of these components. Like, I think that developer onboarding, retention, and infrastructure cost savings on the inside might still be primarily a developer-focused thing, although that even there, you'll have a business impact. But that, like, catering to both of these objectives is important, and not making this hard line and hard distinction, and making sure that your dev portal has both types of content. This is a couple of slides from my strategy deck. I think to be able to do that, to be able to provide both business and developer documentation and to cater to the needs of both of these audiences, I think it's important to have both types of authors in your developer portal. The way we address this is through business content that can create it in the CMS, and developer content that can be automatically added to the site either through CI/CD or through APIs or something like that, so that both of those authoring audiences can contribute content to your site, so that both of those needs can be fulfilled. And ideally, the separation between these two types of content is not that large. So like, I've seen some organizations that say, well, yeah, like the business documentation about our program or interface program, that lives on our marketing side, and then the developer documentation that's really purely focused on developers. I think that that's not a good idea. I think it's better to at least have some basic business documentation to support also the technical documentation. If you want to learn more about things that we are learning from a jury, go and have a look. We have recaps and recordings available online. These are on YouTube. There's a playlist on the Pronovix YouTube channel where you can look at all these jury interviews, and they're really, really insightful and interesting. Warmly recommended to you. Also, go check out devportalawards.org and maybe submit your portal if you haven't done so yet, or if you want to get some feedback on what you're doing as an organization with your team. Number 2, API portals are splitting into interfaces and interface portals and platform portals. I had a talk at the Docs and API Days New York titled "The API Portal is Dead, Long Live the Developer Portal," which basically talks about this shift that I have felt talking with customers, where sometime last year there was suddenly like a big change, or at least how I felt about it, where developer portals used to be the interface for API management solutions. It was always about key provisioning, cataloging, self-service, providing developer experience through good documentation, and doing that for different types of audiences. And it didn't really matter if it was internal or external. It was the same core set of capabilities that typically customers were looking for. And this has shifted because we started seeing two very clear different types of portals that people are trying to build with inside of them, interestingly enough, different types of capabilities and different types of features that are supporting different types of programs from across the organization. Internally, there's the internal portal. Typical API portal, of course, still exists for giving access to APIs. But also API governance is something we talked about in the past, and we had some customers that use our portal to implement API governance, but also developer onboarding and service catalogs. These are more traditional things. But what we started seeing is that IDPs, this is how they're called in the platform world, in the DevOps world, became really, really popular with the rise of Backstage, an open source developer portal that Spotify launched for that is used for internal uses. People got really excited about building a catalog of services and things inside that enables GitOps or DevOps and maybe inner source. Now, from what I've heard, it takes quite a lot of effort to build these kind of portals. But if you have a large engineering team or a platform team, there's different tools that can be used to start addressing these kind of things. Then these portals, these internal portals, I feel are really differentiating into platform portals. Well, I'll explain in a second. Externally, we saw last year a big bump or quite a few leads coming in asking for marketplace capability. It was this idea of creating a single place where they could sell or expose or make available all of their APIs from across the organization in one place. Monetization has always been there, partner ecosystems, developer relations, and developer marketing. But then also, and this is something new, this is more this year. It might be that we're seeing it because we started thinking about it. But this idea of developer hubs, which is very close to marketplaces, except that it's less about the monetization and the selling APIs no matter where they come from, and more about creating a comprehensive way of interacting with your interfaces and what you're making available for developers. And this documentation center on the outside. So what I feel that is happening is that there's this split between internal platform portals and external interface portals. And platform portals enable and encourage reuse. I think that's their primary purpose. They're about the enablement of the creation of platform assets that become better from reuse. So the more people are using that asset, the better they become. And this is kind of interesting because normally with infrastructure, that's not the case. Like you don't want people to use it more. This is, well, it depends a bit, but because there's a cost to that. With platform assets, normally you don't have, or there's less of a cost, or there's more value in reuse than there's cost in reuse. And then the other one is interface portals. And the way I think about this is that this is kind of like this turtle where you're creating a shield around your organization and you're constraining the places where people can interact with you. Also, we have this. We have the face where our sensory organs are located, through which we are interacting, and we are sensing through a controlled interface that helps us to do more with what's happening around us. Also allows us to interact with the world in a constrained way. And this is useful because as the world is becoming more and more complex, it helps us to make sense of what's happening out there and protecting ourselves from what's happening out there.
there's a whole bunch of really, really cool stuff, kind of mind-bending stuff, highly philosophical stuff that connects to the complexity series we did last year. You can find more about that in the API Resilience podcast and the recordings we have from the complexity conferences we did. But there's this idea of enabling constraints, this thing that's complex adaptive organisms like humans or like organizations these enabling constraints that are used to manage the complexity of the world, to let in what feeds them, to interact with symbionts, and to keep out what harms them. And yeah, I think that this is what we're doing when we're doing APIs, is that we are enabling new behavior by constraining how information flows. And this frees up energy, because without constraining information, you just become overwhelmed. Also, it's hard to have clear standards for interaction and so on and so on. So constraints enable us to do more with the communities around us. If you're interested in this stuff, there's a new book that just came out. I'm a little bit, I just bought it. It arrived 2 days ago or 3 days ago. I'm a little bit worried that it's going to be a heavy mind bender. Actually, my friend Mark Bergauer kind of warned me for that. But I'm super excited about it because Alicia Guerrero is a super smart woman who did amazing work with explaining how constraints, what constraints do and how they enable these emergent systems, the systems that are constantly evolving through the interaction with the world around them. And I believe that there's a path here for organizations to become more complex adaptive in a more deliberate way, also through our technical systems, not just through human interfaces. So I warmly recommend this book, even though I haven't read it yet, but I trust that it's going to be like a game changer or a mind opener. Now, back to the topic. So I think that there's this shift happening from DevPortals being about APIs only to DevPortals that are becoming their own thing with a clear, much broader purpose. And I think there's two types of DevPortals. There's this internal platform portals and external interface portals. And one last throwback to the complexity conference series. This is Jay Bloom. He used to work at Red Hat. He's now he's now part of a consultancy. I think he's one of the founding members. He developed this 3 economies model, which is about it's kind of like an answer to the wall of confusion that happens when you have this bi-model IT, you know, the business IT and the IT organization. Business IT, that's all about differentiation. IT organization, that's all about scaling, and differentiation as in a way to create more value for your customers and also capture more value, and scaling as in how can we reduce costs by doing things the same way over and over and over again. I believe that internal portals sit here at the economy of scope, and I'm not going to go more in detail about this. I've talked a lot about this, and we've got other recordings, or if you want to hear more about this, just ask me or look it up. But these reusable assets, these platform assets, I think this is where this is the function that internal portals play, is to enable organizations to become more differentiated and better scaling through the building of platform assets. And then external portals, interestingly enough, because I thought they also said here in economy of scope, because APIs are economy of scope, but external portals sit here, I think, in the economy of differentiation, where they help you to differentiate your organization right now through differentiated APIs, later maybe through the set of APIs that you're exposing and how you're communicating about them and what kind of access you give to them. But I think there's 2 different things, and an internal portal as an economy of scope asset needs to be treated very differently and managed in a different way than an external portal that's that's living an economy of differentiation. Here it's about enabling reuse and creating the conditions that will help your organization to build a successful platform. Here it's about creating better ways of differentiating your business and interacting with the ecosystems that you're building. Anyway, enough about this. If you want to learn more, there's the API Resilience podcast that we recorded last year. There's also a presentation that Jay Bloom did. And just generally, if you're game for this kind of philosophy of API kind of stuff, go check out the API Resilience podcast. We got a lot more talks like that there. If you're more into the, okay, but make this more practical, we also started a new podcast, the Developer Success podcast, where we're doing interviews with people that are running API teams and developer portal teams. Like one example is the episode we did with Sumitro from IKEA, who talked about the portal that they built with Backstage. And then like just hearing how they're thinking about things and how they're seeing these two as distinct things that need to be addressed differently. Very, very interesting stuff. Okay, how are we doing? I'm gonna take a little pause here, have a quick look at the questions, if there's any questions already. Lots of questions or lots of comments. Let's see. Okay, so sorry about the microphone mix-up. Is the signal okay? I have learned this week that my internet connection is not using a strong enough cable, that the company, my provider, made a mess up, and we're going to order a new connection. I hope that it hasn't interfered too much with the presentation, that most of it came through. I'm alone in the house now, so it's not the kids or something that are eating up the signal. Okay, so I don't see any questions yet, so I'll just keep going, and then we'll come back for questions afterwards. So let's get back. Last topic that I want to talk about is AI readiness. And it's 2023. You can't talk about trends without talking about AI. It's just impossible. Everybody, it feels like it's everywhere. Or maybe that's me. Maybe that's because because of the people that I'm following, and the space that I'm monitoring. But there's lots and lots of talk about AI. So I don't want to talk to you today about the use of LLMs for making developer portals or for exposing the content from developer portals through generative AI kind of way. There's other people talking about this kind of stuff. There's also the I think that before, so when I was thinking about AI, I started realizing that maybe the smartest move to adapt and adopt AI is not necessarily to go all in and start experimenting with AI directly, but maybe it's more about AI readiness, is to think about the systems and processes that we can put in place today that will enable us to rapidly adopt and adapt to new AI changes that are coming out. And to instead of like looking at AI directly, to look at the foundations that are necessary to do AI or to utilize AI systems, or this artificial general intelligence, because that's what everybody's so hyped about. There's a bunch of other types of machine learning systems that are already in use and that might be more mature for business applications. But regardless of how these things are going to evolve, I think that there's certain fundamentals that we can do today that will help to make us easier in the future to adopt or adapt AI. So, and what are those things? You're already hear me coming. I think that it's basically if we can create a comprehensive set of APIs and good documentation, that those will help us with AI adoption. Why is that? I believe that, first of all, you need platform APIs. So that's the capabilities that you have in your organization that people can use to do their jobs inside of your organization, that they become available so that later you can also add, like expose them through an AI system or an AGI system or whatever it is. So I think that's thinking about your domain, like the domain model of your organization, and what capabilities that you have, and how to expose those in through an interface. I think that's a first step. I think also I think it can be useful to, or I think it's also important to have a good documentation that can be searched and referred to, because even if you have an AI answering your question, or even if you're using a large language model to answer your questions, or to answer questions, I think it can make sense to then link back out to documentation that has been validated and approved as a whole unit by the humans that are that can make sure that your documentation is up to date. I also think that up-to-date documentation is going to become even more important tomorrow, because I believe that you'll need it to train your large language models or whatever AI that you're using, or machine learning that you're using, which means that you need to have the processes and the tools in place to create up-to-date documentation, comprehensive up-to-date documentation. The reason why I believe that this is super important is this article. There was this leaked report from Google. There is no moat. I don't know if you've heard about it. I have a blog post about this topic where you can read more about it, and also get the link to people talking about that report. But basically in that report, researchers at Google said, oh, oops, there's actually we have a problem, because for years we've been going on the understanding that having a lot of data was going to give us a competitive advantage against competition, because having a lot of data is essential for training machine learning systems. Now, what they've seen with large language models is that you can take an existing large language model that already knows how to respond in a an acceptable way, or that has this language construction, this generative aspect already, and then you can retrain it with a relatively small but highly focused and high quality data set to do specific jobs. So it is possible to take an open source large language model and to retrain it to do a very specific job, even if you don't have like lots and lots and lots of data. So that's why I think that having good documentation in your organization will help you to create qualitative output from these systems. Also, and I think this is really, really important, up-to-date documentation and retraining your AI to give up-to-date answers is also going to become important. It's same thing as with support staff. If you don't give them the resources, if you don't have the processes in place to have up-to-date documentation, then it's the old garbage in, garbage out theme. If you don't have good documentation, then if you don't have a good input, you also can't have a good output. And then the last one, I think that's, and this is me crystal ball gazing, but already today I see a lot more LinkedIn requests, emails, and more I start recognizing that a lot of it is auto-generated. And So the volume of communication is going up yet again. And it was already really high. There was a lot of information to deal with, but this is going to go up even more. So I believe that in the near future, we might actually need we might become more and more dependent on machine learning and artificial intelligence to help us to deal with the inflow and the onslaught of information. So that is almost kind of like a weapons race where as AI gets better at sending you highly targeted personalized email that actually kind of makes sense and that you're like, this could be interesting. You'll also need something to deal with that onslaught of information because otherwise, we're all just going to be paralyzed by information overload. And for that reason, I think that starting today to think about what are the interfaces that you want to expose to the world? How do you want people to interact with you? And this has been that is becoming more and more important. This has been going on for a while now. A lot of organizations have started constraining how they're providing support, where there's no more human support available. Like I was looking, there was a podcast that was being recommended to me on Spotify that I really don't like, and I wanted to teach the AI not to show me that anymore, and I couldn't find where, so I started looking, and then I wanted to send them a support message like, hey, don't show me this stuff anymore, or explain to me how I can turn this off, and I couldn't find it, but there was no place where I could file a complaint or something like that. Now I understand that if you're dealing with support requests at a high volume, you already now today organizations started constraining the interfaces through which those requests can be made. And I think that thinking very consciously about not just support, but also other kinds of interactions that you have with your organization. How does a potential partner sign up to get your RFPs? And this is, a lot of organizations already have that, but where are you declaring those interfaces? How can somebody find out what you have available? A comprehensive list of all the interfaces that you have as an organization for interaction with you, and ways so that we can start automating more and more of these places, so that we can deal with the volume with machines and keep the interesting conversations and the human aspects for the humans. I think that's going to become more and more important. So ultimately, I think we'll still end up with socio-technical systems where there's this amalgamation of humans and machines that creates this wonderfully unpredictable, complex adaptive systems that can deal with environments. So I don't believe that, or at least not in the foreseeable future, where that as long as it's humans that are consumers, that are the people that are deciding what is valuable, these systems will interact with humans and will be influenced by them. So we're going to have this amalgamation going forward, but thinking about more constraints and ways to help make the machine the interface through which people interact with you, so that hopefully you can free up more capacity than for actual human high quality communication also. I think that's what we're going to see in the future. And I go more in depth on some philosophical aspects of the difference between this narrative way of communicating and this more deterministic or engineered way of communicating, like this difference between what we're expecting from machines and what we're expecting from humans. I'd love to hear your feedback on that. If you're interested, I got that also on our blog and on my LinkedIn.